This video is sponsored by Squarespace, for if you need a website for your independent business or band. Love Will Tear Us Apart casts a mighty shadow on Joy Division's career. While the Manchester band recorded 2 studio albums alongside a host of singles, demos and radio sessions, nothing seems to get as much hype as the song etched on Ian Curtis's memorial. And because of that, I won't be talking about that already canonized song, but instead a cut of their monolithic 1979 debut, Unknown Pleasures, one that best exemplifies Joy Division's devastating use of space, their brooding anti-funk grooves, and Martin Hannett's experimental production. A song that inspired the next wave of post-punk and beyond, but also pointed to Curtis's end itself. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of She's Lost Control. The seeds of Joy Division were planted in Manchester, England. Guitarist Bernard Sumner and bassist Peter Hook had separately attended the Sex Pistols' infamous Lesser Free Trade Hall gig on the 4th of June 1976. Tony Wilson, Rob Gretton and Martin Hannett, all important to the Joy Division story, were also at the sparsely attended show. The day after, Hook bought a bass guitar for £35, having no idea how to play the thing. Sumner, though, already had a guitar and the intention to form a band. They hired Ian Curtis in December 1976 through a wanted ad, but having previously known him from various punk gigs around town, he was recruited without an audition. Stephen Morris was added to the lineup after their first couple of drummers proved an ill fit. While many claim their first moniker was Stiff Kittens, the band have, on a regular basis, refuted this was ever a serious suggestion. Their first actual name was Warsaw, named after the David Bowie track, Warszawa. This was soon changed to Joy Division in late 1977, due to fear that they may get confused with the London-based punk band, Warsaw Pact. As well as the usual punk rock influences that all post-punk bands had, Ian Curtis was inspired by The Doors,
There's a killer on the road,
and especially revered the live fast, die young rockstar ideal that Jim Morrison had epitomized. David Bowie was also a touchstone, but Curtis soured on him after he unwittingly survived into his 30s, believing him to be a liar in relation to the lyrics from the song All the Young Dudes.
Speed jive, don't wanna stay alive when you're 25.
Curtis's fantasy of rockstar fame stood in stark opposition of his home life. Married in his teens, and by the recording of Unknown Pleasures, he had become a father. He would find this duality stifling, and as his life went on, this juggling act became increasingly difficult to maintain. Joy Division's early songs were ramshackle from an admiration of the Pistols and not quite knowing how to play their instruments yet. The young band preferred to dwell within provocative Nazi imagery, including the song Warsaw on their An Ideal for Living EP, that featured a concentration camp identification number as an alternative to a traditional count-in.
3, 5, 0, 1, 2, 5, go!
But this EP also features their first step towards being a band of note in No Love Lost. With its post-punk space and groove that was not present in the first strains of UK punk, it recalls moments of Wire's Pink Flag or krautrock bands like Can and Nu. By late 1978, the band had a manager in the form of Rob Gretton, and was signed to the Manchester-based indie label Factory Records, run by local celebrity Tony Wilson. But their luck was soon to change. On the 27th of December 1978, the band went to London for what they'd thought would be their first significant gig outside Manchester, supporting The Cure at the Hope and Anchor in Islington, London. Contrasting their expectation, the gig was at a small pub with only a couple of dozen attendees. They left disappointed. Driving back to Manchester, Curtis and Sumner squabbled over a sleeping bag for warmth, during which Curtis started to convulse. After stopping, allowing the episode to subside, the band raced to Luton Hospital, where he was given some tablets and sent on his way. It would be a month later that Curtis would be clinically diagnosed with epilepsy. This would have a significant impact on him for the rest of his life and would directly inform She's Lost Control. Alongside Joy Division, Curtis worked as the Assistant Disablement Resettlement Officer at Macclesfield Employment Exchange. A year before his own episode, he met a young woman who would come in looking for work. At one point, she had an epileptic seizure while attending one of these meetings. Her plight struck a chord with Curtis, and how this lack of control could be used to illustrate the theme of not having charge in one's own life due to external forces.
Confusion in her eyes, it says it all. She's lost control.
After she stopped coming in, he assumed that she had found employment, only to later find out she had choked to death in her sleep as a result of a violent seizure. By the time the band recorded She's Lost Control for Unknown Pleasures, the song wasn't just solely about her, but about Curtis and his worsening condition. One of his fears was that he would meet the same fate, so he developed a ritual for post-performance evenings. If he hadn't had an episode caused by overstimulation, he and his wife Deborah would stay up until either he'd had a seizure or they heard a change in breathing rhythm that could signal an impending one, before either of them would go to sleep. The first public performance of She's Lost Control was on the John Peel radio show on the 31st of January 1979, less than a week after being diagnosed.
The voice had told her when and where to act. She said, I've lost control again.
Despite being hyped up in the NME since the previous year, this was also the first time the majority of the UK would actually get to hear Joy Division, due to a rarity of singles, touring, and the band having not yet had any national television appearances. An electronic drum pad was used on the track, which they would continue to use in a live setting. It gave live versions of the song an extra discordant element. For the drum beat, Morris was inspired by Phil Spector singles like Be My Baby. The same beat, but played with different sounds. It's just a classic Phil Spector beat. If you listen to it and imagine it played on a big drum kit, it's the same thing really. See, I'm not original at all. She's Lost Control opens side B of Unknown Pleasures and is considered to be the album's centerpiece, and Joy Division's most important track at that point, with Curtis at his most manically arresting, Hook's signature high on the neck bass line, and the alien whack of Morris's drums. The studio version of the track was recorded at Strawberry Studios in April 1979. It was produced by Factory Records' resident producer Martin Hannett, who had previously worked on the Buzzcocks' hugely influential Spiral Scratch EP. As well as Jilted John's eponymous first single, an independent record that had managed to reach number 4 in the UK charts in 1978.
But I know he's a moron. Gordon is a moron.
His eccentric production techniques shaped the album. He insisted that, at least on the potential singles, that each drum be recorded separately, so that he could mix each individually without bleed through. This created an exceedingly clean drum sound that Hannett was able to tinker with to his heart's content. This is why She's Lost Control's drums sound so industrial and machine-like. Curtis's vocals have also been altered, sounding like they're being dragged down, like a strange force has hold on him, which he is unable to fight.
And she's clinging to the nearest passerby. She's lost control.
Hannett would state about Joy Division, they were a gift to a producer, because they didn't have a clue. They didn't argue. Morris expanded on his process to the Vinyl Factory. Martin was very much into twiddling knobs and cackling. He wasn't particularly methodical either, because he didn't really know what the stuff would do. He loved turning knobs and making funny noises. The result was a lot different from what you would have heard if you'd seen Joy Division live circa '79. While Curtis and Morris admired the work Hannett had done, Sumner and Hook believed he had softened their punk heaviness into something they felt would fit on a Genesis or Pink Floyd record. Said Sumner to Mojo, the production inflicted this dark, doomy mood over the album. We'd drawn this picture in black and white, and Martin had coloured it in for us. We resented it. Hook has since been able to admit that Hannett helped shape Joy Division's sound. It's not hard to understand why Martin did what he did with the album now, but at the time it was very hard. Bernard and I would have just made a standard punk record, and tried to take people's heads off with the guitars. Martin made it a masterpiece, and ensured it lasted 30 years. Beyond Joy Division, Hannett and his methods have become shorthand for overindulgence in post-punk production, even getting a shout out in the preamble to The Dead Kennedys, Nazi Punks Fuck Off.
Fuck Off, overproduced by Martin Hannett, take 4.
As much as the album itself is an extremely significant piece of post-punk, influencing everyone from The Cure, U2, Interpol, The Killers, and a whole lot more, its cover is one of the most recognisable album covers of all time. Its seminal wave lines are taken from an image that Sumner had found in the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Astronomy. According to Jen Christensen from the Scientific American, the image shows a series of radio frequency periods from the first pulsar discovered. Factory in-house designer Peter Saville chose to invert the image, making it white on black to evoke space, and to leave the name of the band and the album off the cover. As Saville explained, "We were all the age that bought records, and you don't need the title. It's patronising to its audience." Despite being one of the most iconic t-shirt designs ever, Joy Division never released an official version until 1994. The funniest thing about it was that when I first saw the final cover, I said, "That'll look good on a t-shirt." Rob said, "We don't do t-shirts, that's a shit idea." Rob was quite militant about that. We did it on little badges, but we considered t-shirts a step too far. That was selling out. There's been many different redesigns and reinterpretations of that cover, including this gloriously blasphemous version by Chris Ott. The most famous of these reimaginings was by Disney, whose sunshine brand image contrasted severely with the Spartan doominess of Joy Division. The t-shirt was uploaded in January 2012 and lasted 2 days before an onslaught of music bloggers pointed out the wrong-headedness of the piece of merchandise, and it was removed from their site. Saville nor the band were asked for permission on the t-shirt design. Peter Hook stated, "I hope that Disney will be as understanding when we start doing Donald Duck shirts." Alongside the recording of their second album, Closer, in March 1980, Joy Division recorded a new version of She's Lost Control to be released as a 12-inch single on the flip side of non-album track Atmosphere. Back with Hannett at Strawberry Studios, the 12-inch version of the track was a lot more electronically focused and almost a minute longer. The drum beat is augmented with the sound of an aerosol can, as dramatized in the film Control. He shot me in a room with a can of tape cleaning fluid and made me press it in time with the song. By the end, the booth was just filled with noxious fumes. I think it was just trying to kill me. If I'd lit up a cigarette, the whole of Strawberry Studios would have gone up in smoke. This version of She's Lost Control became one of the last things Joy Division ever recorded. As such, the track bookends their career somewhat. Their first taste of national attention to untimely end. The Unknown Pleasures version showed the band for who they were going to be, post-punks that would inspire the future of popular music, a greatly promising concept. But it also highlighted Curtis's desperation and hopelessness in the face of a condition that would further complicate his increasingly complicated dual existence, a complication that would lead to his suicide on the 18th of May, 1980. While Love Will Tear Us Apart tells of his regrets of his personal decisions, She's Lost Control tells a sadder tale. one that was not his decision to make. Diagnosed with epilepsy, he was no longer able to govern his own body. He was unable to live his dual life. Simply, he'd lost control of everything. Do you have a band? Want to influence an entire wave of popular music? Don't know how to start the impossible process of getting your band out there? Then why not check out Squarespace? Squarespace is a website building service that is ideal for independent businesses, like your band. As a band, with Squarespace, you're able to embed audio streams of your tracks directly onto your site with a beautifully integrated player and album art display. You can also set up an online shop for your digital and physical music, as well as merch like t-shirts with your album cover. Squarespace makes the process of creating your own business website super simple. Not only are there templates, but they're easy to edit using responsive drag and drop tools. Let the people know about your band with a Squarespace website. Head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/trashtheory or use the offer code TRASHTHEORY to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. As I usually do, I'd like to give the biggest shout out to all my supporters. You're all awesome. If you want to join them by supporting the channel, it really does help, especially with such a copyright claim stricken channel such as mine. Again, thank you and see you next time.